we were talking about big data, artificial intelligence, and now machine learning. And even though we're all aware that artificial intelligence is now part of our lives, as one of the last speaker said, it's not that intelligent yet. We're lucky for that. But we do not realize that sometimes the behavior of these algorithms can be everything but ethical. We need to raise awareness on the necessary principles to build a fair and ethical AI-driven technology solutions. And to elaborate more on these elements, I'm thrilled to count with Núria Oliver, Chief Data Scientist of Data Pop Alliance, and someone unique and extremely savvy on these topics. Well, you probably know Núria, I'm sure she's with us, but Núria Oliver is co-founder and Vice President of ELLIS, co-founder and Scientific Director of the ELLIS Unit Alicante, Chief Scientist, Scientific Advisor to the Vodafone Institute, and sharing her PhD in MIT. Núria, how are you doing?
Hi, good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Happy to see you again. Yeah, great to see you. Okay, so we have to make this session super effective because we've got like 14 minutes and we want to listen to you. I know you speak fast, but we need to get into many good ideas. So the first, and this is something that you pointed out sometimes, and I would like to check with you. You say normally that the country who leads the AI will lead the fourth industrial revolution. The question is, are we in a good position? I mean, Spain, Europe?
No, we are not.
Okay, thanks. Great.
Short answer. So there is clearly two leading regions or countries right now in the world, North America on the one hand, and Asia, mainly China, on the other hand, leaving Europe in a dangerous, weak position of like extreme dependency on these two superpowers, these two AI superpowers, on the use of AI in Europe. And this applies to research, innovation, and also the deployment and the use of AI in society. So we do need to react, and obviously European institutions know about this. And I think at this point, we need to make sure that three key pillars are met. We need to have a vision, we need to have ambition, and we need to actually execute on that vision, with ambition, if we want to be competitive in AI on a global scale.
Okay, so vision, ambition, and execute. But my question is, the fact that we are not leading, I wonder, I don't know, I know nothing about this, but I suppose that leading should imply having ethics on mind, and probably, if you don't have ethics on mind, you can run faster. If you have to regulate things, sometimes maybe it takes more time, or it's not because of that. I want to be nice with our people.
No, it's not exclusively or necessarily because of the regulatory framework. A big part of it is because the unprecedented power and growth of a handful of technology companies, both North American and Chinese technology companies. The leadership in research in artificial intelligence today is actually not even in academia. A lot of it is in the research labs of the big technology companies. And because there are no big technology companies in Europe, that's one of the key reasons why Europe is lagging behind North America and China.
Okay, we're not leading, but just trying to be nicer with our people who are not leading yet. I remember a statement from Stephen Hawking, who said once that AI can be the best or the worst thing that happened to humanity. It tends to sound as the worst, but why? Why do you think people feel like it's something dangerous and not as beneficial as it could be sometimes?
Yeah, I actually use that quote in my presentations, at the end of my presentation, mainly to say, let's work together to make sure that AI is the best thing, that has happened to us. So like any other technology, it depends on how you use it, whether it would be, for good or it would be for evil. I think partly the attribution that we make or the negative connotation that we have about AI in our society is also fueled by the science fiction movies that we watch or the novels, science fiction novels that we read, where in most cases, the way artificial intelligence is depicted is not necessarily positive for humanity, right? But I think it's very important to understand that the big challenges that we face as a species, the climate change, the climate emergency, the energy, crisis, pandemics, the aging of the population, we're not going to be able to tackle these challenges without the help of AI. AI is not the solution, but it will definitely be part of the solution. So we do need to show this potential that artificial intelligence has to actually have social positive impact and to help us survive as a species. And that's what motivates my work. And that's, one of the big messages that I want to share here. There are endless opportunities in leveraging artificial intelligence techniques and developing new artificial intelligence techniques to tackle pretty much the 17, or the 16 Sustainable Development Goals. So let's just make sure, and let's work together to make sure that we put AI to a good use, basically.
Yeah, but you tend to say that AI is everywhere, and that's why we need to find a way to let's say, to find the way to use it for good. But how can you use it for good if the guys who code it sometimes, certain times, didn't do it that good? How do you make it? How can you fight against that coders?
Yeah, so I think like in any other sector, we do need regulation on how the technology is being used. We have that for every sector, from whatever the food we eat, where we have safety regulations and all sorts of, health, regulations, to the appliances that we use, they're not going to explode in our face, when we turn on the microwave, because they have complied, with all the regulations. So we need to make sure that the technology that we use also has certain, guarantees and provisions of respecting fundamental, human rights and principles, such as, equity or non-discrimination, respecting individual and group privacy, or, preserving human autonomy. So avoiding the subliminal manipulation of human behavior that we are probably all victims of, on a daily basis.
Okay, and if we look at the way AI should be developed by those guys who code it and trying to make it in a good way, do we need to think that they should be helping individuals the same way they can help big amounts of people? I mean, should they help all of them at the same time? Is this a thing of mass, or it can help also individuals?
Well, AI is fundamentally software, and software is scalable. So you can deploy, the software relatively easily, into hundreds of thousands and millions and, thousands of millions, of people. So it has this power, being extremely scalable. At the same time, using artificial intelligence techniques, we can personalize services and products and have a better understanding of each of us individually, right? And adapt to each of us. So I think you can build systems that are that have sort of like that are tuned to the individual characteristics of the different people, but at the same time you can deploy them massively, to millions.
No, I was thinking that because if we talked in the previous session about the ADMS, the automated decision-making systems, which can affect personally to one individual, or it can help a big amount of people. But at the same time, I was thinking on what you run through ELLIS and what you did through AI and related to the pandemic, as you were pointing out. Now, I would love for you to explain us how you faced or how you used technology in favor of the people in the COVID.
Yeah, so the main purpose of that project was to close the gap that there is between where the data is, if we think that data is a digital representation of an underlying reality, and where the decision makers are, the people that are actually making decisions that impact all of us. And what we would like is that for those decisions to be informed by evidence, to be based on some underlying reality. So what we need is to be able to fill the gap between where the data is and where the decision makers are. And to do that in the context of the pandemic, I have been leading a team of 25, more or less, scientists from the Valencian research ecosystem. And we have been working very closely with the presidency of the Valencian government here in the Valencian region, and working on four main areas. Modeling large-scale human mobility from publicly available, aggregated mobile data, because of course, an infectious disease that is transmitted from human to human, like coronavirus, doesn't become a pandemic if we don't move. And that's why we have been confined, for so many months. So modeling mobility is very important. The second piece of work has been on building computational epidemiological models that will enable us to predict how the pandemic curve is going to evolve, not only under the current scenario, but also under different possible interventions. What will happen if we close schools? What will happen if we don't allow travel? What will happen if we don't allow, gatherings and so forth? Mm-hmm. The third area is building predictive models to predict hospital occupancy, intensive care occupancy, and also to infer the prevalence of the disease. And the fourth area is a very large citizen survey that we launched in March of 2020 called COVID-19 Impact Survey, and it's become one of the biggest in the world. It has over 700,000 answers right now, and it has enabled us week after week to understand what is the situation and the perception of people throughout the pandemic.
As far as I know,
the work has not only had impact like here in Spain, but also internationally. So we were the world winners of the X Prize Pandemic Response Challenge with our computational epidemiological models, and also assistant to recommend interventions to decision makers. And we've also won Best Paper Award in a machine learning sort of like international conference. So it's been nice to be able to help locally, but also have impact globally.
That's exactly what I was going to say, that as far as I know, you were doing even forecasts with 180 days, I think, before anything happened in 236 countries. And I suppose you still track what's going on with the pandemic, of course, this is not over. But you are probably now tracking what's going on in Europe, what's happening in the world, what's happening in Spain. Any idea you can give us in 30 seconds to know a bit what's going to come?
Well, I mean, as we see in Northern Europe, in Germany, in Netherlands, the cases are increasing. As we reopen our societies and we, socialize more, with less and less of like protection, measures, the virus is still around, the virus is still here, so the virus is going to be circulating. And the key is how protected we are not to get really sick, when we get coronavirus. And that's why the vaccines play such an important role to protect each of us from getting, a very serious case of the disease. One of the biggest questions, and I guess the empirical data, most clear empirical data was from Israel, was how does the efficacy of the vaccine decline over time, right? In Israel, they had to do the third dose for the Pfizer vaccine because, it had been 6 months since the first dose, since the first 2 doses, since the last of the second dose, and then it seemed that it was losing some of the efficacy in preventing serious, complications from getting the virus. So I think that's one of the areas to be very observant about, how the efficacy of the vaccines, might be evolving in the next weeks or couple months, because even though there might be a lot of cases, if those cases don't translate into hospitalizations or, deaths, it might be acceptable, from a social perspective. The challenge is when, getting the disease means serious health complications and potentially even death. That's where, we do have a problem, obviously.
Yeah. Definitely. We've got 1 minute left. I'm going to extend 1 more minute, I suppose. Sonia, George is not going to be angry with me. But the question here is, I wanted to go through. I'm going to do 2 questions. I mean, I've got plenty, but I'm going to go on 2 of them. First one, connected with AI and machine learning and bias, and having in mind that many of those algorithms were coded basically by men. We were saying at the beginning of the sessions, and there was a study, I think it was from AI Now, I think it was run by University of New York, but I'm not very sure. But anyway, the information which was interesting was that I think it was a 10%, in between 10 and 15% of the people who were coding in Google and Facebook, and both, were women, and the rest were men. How are we talking about anything if we don't? I mean, if we don't make it properly. I mean, it's kind of stupid to be talking about all those algorithms that you say they are everywhere. Okay. But who is coding them? And it's that bros, man, and all that thing. So how can we fix that?
Yeah, well, it's a very difficult question to answer in 30 seconds. Indeed, the lack of diversity in the computing field in general, and specifically in AI, is very worrisome. There are roughly between 12% and 15% of female students in computer science in Spain, for example, and that figure has been going down since the 1980s. There were more women in computer science in the 1980s than there is right now, even though technology is everywhere, and there are so many opportunities for the people that know about technology. So it is absolutely critical that we as a society inspire the next generations of girls and female teenagers, to study this field, because we do know that any field that lacks diversity, it is a field that is not realizing its full potential. There is a loss only in Europe of billions every year because of not having enough women in technology, and we also do know that the solutions built by teams that are not diverse are less inclusive and less innovative than the solutions and the ideas generated by diverse teams. So we do need it as a society, and I think it is our duty to really, again, implement actions with ambition to try to revert this situation, which is, really worrisome, and is due to a variety of factors, from stereotypes into, who is a programmer, or who works in computer science, and how the discipline is being taught, to a lack of role models and a lack of visibility of women working in technology, to really sexist and misogynist culture in many technology circles called the programmer culture, to what is called gender biases that we all have and that make us undervalue women systematically. And when I say we all, I mean we all. So we women tend to underestimate ourselves and also other women, and then men too.
Clearly. You see, the good thing of asking is that you don't have to respond in 30 seconds, so difficult things. Now, 10 seconds. Last one. I need to ask you about this because I read it from you and I think it's really key. You advise so many administrations about how to manage ethically and address these things of algorithms. But I wonder about following generations. Should they have some new skills or learnings at school to kind of understand better how to address this? And we finish with this in 20 seconds.
Yes, I think we need to change what we teach and how we teach. I think on the what, we should include a transversal subject of computational thinking, and also on the how we teach, on the kind of soft skills that we teach. I think we should reinforce a lot more creativity, critical thinking, and abilities from our social and emotional intelligences that are key to us as a species to survive, and that maybe we are even losing because we are not exercising them enough.
Great. Núria Oliver, it was great listening to you, learning from you. Next time, I hope we can meet you here physically. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. The pleasure has been mine.